Hey guys, and welcome to another Hobby Tips. Today we're going to be talking about Undercoat Spray. So when you're getting into the hobby, this is something you're going to come across and you're going to have to make a decision on. And in the early days when you're just buying your first paint set or your first set of models, you might just choose to hand undercoat them with just a brush and a pot of paint, and that's totally fine. But at some point very soon in your hobby, or even in the beginning, you're going to probably purchase some undercoat spray, and there's a lot of choices out there, a lot of different brands. As we can see in front of me, I've got a few of them here, although they're all from the one maker, and there's a good reason for that. But there are a lot, and I'm not going to try to influence and say that this brand in front of me is the only one to choose, but it's certainly one that's tried and tested and has been around for a long time, and generally on the whole does work very well. But we're not going to talk about just that. We're going to discuss some other options too. So why would you prime anything? Why would you bother with that? Well, there's a few reasons. Miniature paints, acrylic miniature paints we're talking about here. When you're painting on a plastic surface or a metal surface, these types of things, or resin, you're going to find that the acrylic paint doesn't stick very well or bond very well. It tends to sort of it goes a bit funny, and it can flake off. It can do all kinds of things depending on the surface. For instance, with resin, when resin is cast, it leaves a residue on the surface, and so if you don't clean that properly and then prime it properly, then you're not going to have that acrylic paint stick at all. It will just come off like straight away. Often it'll flake like eggshell. You'll just get little pieces of it coming off. So there's a really good reason there to be using a primer. And primers, the chemical composition of it is a little different. Even if it's an acrylic primer, which is what we're also talking about here, it's all acrylic. We're not using oils. We're using acrylic ones, with maybe the exception of this guy on the end. Pretty sure this is still acrylic, but it's a little different. But we'll talk about that guy at the end. So you are looking at needing to prime that surface. It's very similar to like if you're painting a house or you're painting something, in the real world object that isn't a miniature. You'll also prime that too. You put a base coat down or a base layer, and then you'll put your top coat on top. That happens pretty much with every type of painting outside of miniatures, and it's no different for miniatures. So we need to be picking a primer, and that's going to improve your painting quality. It also helps in a lot of cases give a deeper luster or a deeper finish for a lot of colors. They find it hard to go over a basic material like a grey plastic or a metal or resin surface. So yeah, you definitely want that. And you've got a few different varieties or ways that you can prime. I guess the foremost two are black and white. Okay, so you're probably going to pick one of those to begin with, and then from there's a lot of variations. You can prime in a color. You can do a very fancy technique, which is zenithal, which is basically what it sounds like, zenith above. So you're going to be undercoating with one color first, and then usually a lighter color on top, from top down, to simulate a light hitting the model. And there's a lot of reasons why you do that, for establishing maybe a light source if you're doing something more painterly, or just to help you see the model, or give you a brighter base to work on for lighter colors, and give you some darks so that you can help use that to shadow the model. So there's a few reasons why you would do that. And then also a range of colors, a range of other tones that you might use. This also applies to terrain making as well. You might use these colors on terrain too. So there's a few different ones, but black and white is the main, and then usually like a gray of some sort you'll use. And then outside of that, often either a colored spray or a metallic spray for certain applications. And then in addition to that, outside of these types of primers, if you're doing 3D printing or anything similar to that, or often sometimes some resin stuff, you might actually do which is this one on the end here, this surface primer. So this is actually a sandable one, and so if you go to your local hobby store, you'll find Tamiya does a brand. This one's Mr. Hobby, but there's a range of them. These are designed a lot for other scale model kits, things like that, where you want to be finishing surfaces and sanding or doing very fine modeling work, and they work really great for pre-priming, even before your undercoat, a 3D printed object. So that will actually fill a lot of the stepping that you'll get in a 3D print, which is very important. So for 3D printing, you're going to be using some sort of sandable surface primer, and that will help finish the surface so that you lose a lot of that imperfections. And often you don't even have to sand or do any other finishing work at all. You just have to give it a quick spray. And I've got something here that we can see. It's one of my own sculpts that I've 3D printed. And if it gets into focus there, put it in the light maybe, you can just kind of see on that peck, there's like a bit of a wavy line going through that, and that's the layers on the print. And just on the bottom, sort of this spot here, if that goes in focus, you can just kind of see in the light there's those wavy lines. And so if you were to just literally do nothing to this surface and just prime with that primer, it would almost completely eradicate that. And once you put your base color down, you'll lose all of those little tiny steps, and it'll be a clean surface. And so that's one you'll definitely use. So first up, I will say, if you're doing any kind of 3D printing, you'll be getting one of these guys, and the price is pretty nice compared to actually Citadel over here. Their price point for those, mostly, at least in Australia, is quite affordable. Looking at too much money, maybe I can't really remember exactly the price, but it's about between 15 and 20 bucks, I think, for most of those smaller cans. So that's not too bad. These, however, do end up being a little more expensive, but they are good. So let's move straight into that. So firstly, I would say when you're starting out, you're going to be wanting to, I believe you're going to pick black. I think black is by far the best choice for almost everything. There are obviously arguments for white, but I'm a long time proponent of black. I think black works a lot better, and it lets you hide a lot of things. So if you're only just painting new and you're just doing like quick dry brushes or things like that on the surface or anything like that, if you miss a spot, it's going to be dark, it's going to be black, it's going to look like a shadow. If you've got white, anything that you miss with that paint, it's going to show up really, really, really bright and strong. Unless you're choosing to go into that sort of, you're following GW painting guides and you're going to do contrast paints and stuff like that, they require a lighter primer. But if you're not doing that kind of very particular type of contrast paint thing and you're just doing normal painting, then a black undercoat is the way to go, and that solves half your problem. It'll be better for putting metallics over it. It'll be better for most colors. A few light tones like yellows and stuff like that, it will suffer from. But unless you're painting Imperial Fists or something like that, that's like all yellow or a really bright color, then pretty much every other color under the sun is going to be much better with black. So the first thing would be a black undercoat. And then in terms of brand, I would 100%, as you can see in front of me, I would pick Citadel first. So Citadel is the first one. It is a bit more expensive. However, they are tried and tested, and they work way more than they don't. Okay, all spray cans will at some point fail on you, and that's got less to do with the can and more to do with your environment, which is a key component of this. But we'll talk about that in a second. But that is an element to consider. And so you're going to spend something like 30-40 bucks, I think, on most spray cans. There are other brands, I don't have them in front of me, but if you are going to choose another brand, I would say make sure it is a high quality acrylic spray, and it's designed for like some sort of pro artist application, and that's probably going to work best. And I would definitely ask them to show you something that's been sprayed on so you can see. Now, I used to work for the company back in the day, that's Games Workshop, and I've taught tons and tons of people how to paint on painting tables here in Australia when we used to do all that stuff in stores. Doesn't happen as much these days, but back in the day it was very hands-on. And the number of kids and people that would come in with ruined models because they went to a local art shop or hobby shop or a hardware and just bought some some random undercoats, some random primer spray for like 10 bucks and sprayed their models with it and just completely ruined the surface of the model. Like it's countless, and you've just wasted all of that to try to save 10 bucks here or there on a cheap can and then ruin your $100 model is insane to me. if you're going to invest in this hobby, then invest in this hobby and make sure you get everything as, you know, as right as possible in terms of what these things are designed for. So with paint, you want to choose paint that's designed for that application. Now, you're going to see tons of YouTube videos that talk about artist paints and artist stuff, and that's great, and there are definitely ones that you can use. But in the early days, those people that are picking that, if you notice, they're all very experienced hobbyists and been around for a long time, and they understand all of that stuff and they know how to pick those things. And if you're new in the hobby, that's going to be much more difficult. It's going to be a bit of trial and error, and you're probably going, I'm not saying don't explore and try those things, but certainly I would say build up a bit of knowledge first. That's personal experience, not YouTube videos, including myself, including my own videos. Don't follow whatever I'm saying to the T. Go out there and make those choices for yourself. But I would definitely recommend choosing something that's made by a hobby company or someone that's actually interested in the products that you're buying, right? Because they're going to design this stuff as close to fit that thing as possible, i.e. painting miniatures as opposed to a car or, you know, a house or whatever those painting companies are concerned with, or a canvas, for instance. So that's, you know, it's basically, it's got to do with the granularity of the paint itself. So how fine it is, a lot of things like that, how it dries, how it finishes, matte, you know, gloss, satin, or ultra matte finishes, stuff like that. There's a whole range of issues that come in, and those things all affect the final quality of that and how a paint will stick to it as well. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this, but there are other brands. So blacks first and foremost, definitely. Now the second type of, and then white if you are doing something really bright or light. So the second type of undercoat sprays that I would then recommend is dabbling in your zenithal spray, because that actually works really well for a lot of things and will help you to understand light on the model, not completely, but it lets you read that model a little bit easier and will allow for some lighter tones and things like that, and so you still get those darks from the black. And so Gracia here is the one to try. It even gives you that little bit of a hint that this is a color that's used for this type of thing. See, contrast undercoat. So they're even trying to tell you that this is actually quite good for this. So a black and a Gracia, I think, to begin with, well, black first and then a Gracia would be great. Even I would even probably go a Gracia as a total undercoat over white for a lot of instances. I just think that's going to be better. Pure white undercoat is very, very, I don't know, I've never liked it. All the way through from the beginning, I've never liked pure white undercoats. They do work, I said, in some cases. Pretty much just, you know, Imperial Fist Space Marine armor is pretty much where they shine, and obviously White Scars if you're doing that. But even then, I would do the grey, not that, for White Scars, because White Scars armor isn't pure white; it's actually an off grey and an off white. Sorry. So you would still probably not do a white undercoat. You'd do this. I would choose this over that. So yeah. So you just undercoat your model, Gracia from the top. Beautiful. You'll get a nice light grey to dark black, you know, gradient over your model, and you can start. And there are other variants. We've got this standard grey here, which is a little bit more of a green grey. That's a darker colour, so you could try that as well, but that's got a lot of green in it, so you want to be careful about adding too much colour in unless it's appropriate for what you're doing. And then finally, something I think is great is metallic sprays. These things are awesome if you're batch painting something, and also coloured sprays like, you know, reds, blues, greens, stuff like that. And Citadel has all those colours because, you know, they're in the business of selling you stuff that's going to work for your armies, and most other game systems these will be very useful for. So we've got some brass here and some metal color, lead belcher, and both of these I've used extensively and they're great. So you're doing a metallic color scheme of any sort, or the predominant areas on your model are going to be metallic, then yeah. But even then, if you're going to do this, you are still going to need this guy down here. You will need some black, because black is your base, your primer, and so you do that first, and then the others go on top. Some people, some wilder, you know, wild people out there will just go straight into that over the you know, the plastic or resin or whatever or 3D print, whatever you're spraying on. But I'm very traditional and very old school, and I would always do some kind of primer first, a black, before I do anything else on top. It just helps set up the model. you know, and that's just what I would do. So black first, then that, because then anything that you don't hit with this, it's more efficient with this, because it means you don't have to use as much of it, because anything you don't hit is going to be black and going to give you an immediate shadow, which can help you in the painting stages. So you definitely want that. So then you can use either, and that's for any color really, whether you're doing blue or anything else. I would still do a black undercoat first before I would spray that on. Maybe in some very particular case, some particular color, you might not need to. If it's a deep and rich enough color, it might not need it. But I've found mostly, or if you're doing like a light red or something, I might even do the gray first and then the red over that. So they're just some initial thoughts I've got on this. I hope that's helped get you in. So in terms of price, yeah, you're looking at 30 to 40 bucks for most of these. If you're in another country, it'll be a different price, but in Australia, we pay top dollar for our Citadel stuff, which probably most people around the world know that Australia and New Zealand and stuff like that pays through the nose for their GW product. But anyway, but it's still worthwhile. It's like I still buy it and I still use it. I could go out there, I'm well experienced enough, I could go and choose other ones, but I still feel, even after all this time, that these are definitely the way to go. It just cuts out that worry and thought process. I know they're going to work. And one final thing before I leave you, just to touch on that idea of environmental influences on your undercoats and on your primers. So you are going to need to watch that. So you want basically you want like a pleasant day. You don't want it too cold or too hot. So something, I guess, between, I don't know, between near 20 degrees or so to 24 degrees. That's like the ultimate zone. But you can go a little bit colder. You can go out there, as long as you're not out there for a long time, and you can go a bit hotter. You just want to, if you're in a hot, then you just want to be in the shade, or if you're in a cold place, just make sure you rigorously shake up the can and then give it a good spray, and don't stay too long in that environment, and you should be okay. But you want a very mild temperature, like normal temperature, mid-range for most spraying. Otherwise you're going to get bubbling and all kinds of like weird effects on the surface. That's the only thing that there is a problem. And then obviously these are highly toxic, so you must wear some kind of mask for the vapors, so make sure you do that. And that's pretty much it. And then finally, just a little touch on if you are going to go the hand painting or using primer through an airbrush, then you can get specific paints that are called primer paints. So they're similar composition to these, but just in a pot. And in that case, I would recommend the Vallejo one. So Vallejo does a primer, which I might have sitting around here somewhere, possibly. Maybe it's over there. Yeah, here we go. Surface primer. So just as a side note, you could also get this if you wanted to. And this color you just put into your airbrush with your thinner and so on. And, you can spray it that way, or you can hand paint it on. So if you wanted to do that and you didn't want to spend the money on this, then I would go the Vallejo surface primer if you were going to go that way. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. I hope that's helped, and get you going with undercoats and that sort of thing, or 3D printing if you're going to be doing that. And yeah, if you've enjoyed this, please hit that subscribe button, notify button, all that stuff. Really helps me out. But otherwise, I'll catch you on the next one.